How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 3 of Portfolio Talks. Today, we're going to be talking about RESPs for doctors. So, you've probably had a kid and you had that guilt. Right when you had a kid, you thought, should I be doing RESPs? Should I not be doing RESPs? Is it urgent for me to do right away? Is it a smart strategy or is it an emotional trap that everyone just guilts me into doing? So, follow along. Episode 3, Portfolio Talks, will dive into RESPs for doctors, the good, the bad, the ugly, all the details. And of course, if you could like, share, and subscribe, it really helps us out on that front to keep on giving you the information that you need to make your career as successful as possible. So let's jump into it.
Hey, getting money is my job. Come and pull up to Portfolio Talks. Hey, paper stacking around the clock. Time to pull up to Portfolio Talks. Yeah. Portfolio Talks. Hey, Portfolio Talks.
All right, we are diving into RESPs. As always, you have myself, Vishal, you have Tyson Nagasaka from Portfolio Planning, and we're going to teach you everything you need to know about RESPs because a lot of our clients, and ourselves included, we both have kids, that initial thing of you look at this baby and you're like, holy cow, your entire future is in my hands. And I guess I got to do an RESP and I don't even know what that is, how to do it. It's just another acronym that's in Canada, which is a lot of them. So, the pain point really for you guys is you want to build for your kid's future, which is respectful and admirable, but you're not really sure. Sorry, but you're not really sure how to do it or how much you should prioritize that in relation to your other goals. And you kind of want to balance family life. You want to balance your retirement. You want to balance everything, which is always hard to do. So, RESPs are one of those things that we're going to chip away at today. And by the end of the episode, you should have a good understanding of, do you want to do RESPs, how it works, what the next steps are to get that started for you, and some traps to look out for. Before we jump into it, Tyson, anything to add on?
Not really. The majority of the work that we do right now, we're working with incorporated professionals, medical professionals, doctors, dentists, optometrists. So their cash flow and their means is a lot different than like my legacy client base, where I used to work with like middle class, middle income Canadians. And we used to have a serious conversation because sometimes it is more important to prioritize your retirement over your children's education because kids can get a loan for school. You can't get a loan for retirement. In the current like client base that we work with, it's not the same like prioritization. So I think it's just be aware of your circumstances, like what level of income you are and like what you want to do, because you can fund your children's education. We just want to also make sure if you're more like in the middle, you're the average Canadian, is you have a serious look at your long-term savings picture as well, and then prioritize.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a conversation that we have when we talk to our clients. One of the first things that we do, well, I guess the second thing, the first thing we usually do is help you get out of debt, and that's like your only priority, which is totally fair and it should be. After that is when the debt starts ramping down and you start building your full actual real financial plan as a practicing practitioner, is retirement readiness. So what is that number that you need to hit in order to get to your retirement? And it's really a reverse engineering time value money calculation of, based on your ideal life, this is what's going to cost you in retirement. So now we can calculate how much you need then, what your government benefits are going to do, and then how much you need to fund yourself, and you can work backwards. The reason why that's so important is as your income comes in, automatically the non-negotiable is this money that should be going to retirement, because unlike your children who could fund their retirements many different ways, they could go to school, or sorry, they're going to go to school. They could work while they're going to school is what I meant to say.
That's
They
correct.
could get a scholarship. They could take a student loan and line of credit. They could take a sabbatical for a year, get back into it. There's so many different ways for them to fund their education. But as Tyson and I mentioned over and over again, and you'll realize this as you've listened to our last episode and our further episodes, is you have no one else to retire you. And even if you're expecting an inheritance, you don't know what that looks like. So you need to plan for your own retirement. Otherwise, you may be in a situation where you're stuck doing clinical forever. And that may sound great for you as an early career, physician, for example. Like, I love my profession. I'm finally working in it. I don't think I would ever retire. We hear that often is I'll never retire. I love my job. That can change after you're, doing clinic for 20 years straight. I can't wait to retire. Well, the reason why I mentioned that is it's important to know all the buckets that your money should go to. And retirement is the most important one. After that, you'll have subsequent goals like RESPs. One of the things that we always go to on our episodes, which is becoming an increasingly, popular topic, is the Mythbusters. I want to just also say thank you everyone for the feedback on the last episode. Just an event actually, Tyson. You probably meant if you want to mention this a little bit here too as well. But we just had an event on the weekend at the Happy Gilmore Lounge in Burnaby, Coquitlam, Burnaby, maybe both, Burquitlam. So we had an event there, and it was fantastic. So shout out to Happy Gilmore Lounge. We watched the Masters. Rory won, made it tough on himself, but he won. That's all that matters. And through that event, it was fantastic because we had a bunch of guests that came and they listened to our podcast. And one of them was just laughing. He was like, man, I was just listening to your podcast on the way here. And we chuckled. I was like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. You might have an overdose of Vishal in your ear, but we really appreciate the feedback on this. So as always, we're going to go through Mythbusters. We're going to go through our learning, teach you guys about the topic, and then we're going to wrap up with our prescription pad. And if you want to get your questions into the prescription pad, make sure you join our closed Facebook group for doctors across Canada. It's a place where we'll let you know what we're chatting about. You can put your questions in there and then we'll answer them here. Tyson, I'll pass off to you. Let's bust the first myth, which is you should fund your kids' RESPs immediately.
Right. The funny part about this is we've talked about this offline, is as soon as you have the child in the hospital, there seems to be somebody that either shows up at your bedside or they call you right away and be like, hey, I heard you had a kid. Congratulations. By the way, you should sign up for an RESP. Kudos for the initiative and whatnot. That type of it's almost like door-to-door sales, but for children's education. That's hard to do. So you got to respect the hustle for that. However, the program is not always the most flexible. It's not the best program. You don't get a choice of how you invest the money. There's a myriad of things that I would say, hold on, let's look at some options before you lock in with this person. And so what do we want to do? And so with clients that have means, we have a couple of choices. We have some scenarios, and I put together a little walkthrough. Let me see if I can share this. All right. You can see this?
Yep, we're good to go.
Okay. RESPs for doctors. You're a doctor, you're an incorporated medical professional, you have had children. Do you fund their RESP, and what does that look like? So we had some assumptions built into this example to take out all of these what ifs and then just focus on a couple of different scenarios. We're going to assume you're going to get a 9% compound annual growth rate on your RESP investments. The time horizon is 18 years. So you're starting this at 0 years old. As soon as your child gets a social insurance number, the Canadian Education Savings Grant is 20% match up to $2,500 a year. The lifetime Canadian Education Savings Grant, the CESG, is $7,200 per child. And if you're investing corporately, we're assuming it's 6% passive rate after tax. And redemption is going to last 4 years because your child's going to go to school for 4 years. Although if they're going to follow in your footsteps and they're going to be a doctor, it's going to be 10 years in school. So let's look at these scenarios. Scenario A, you have $50,000. You're going to fully fund the child's RESP at birth and leave it invested in your tax-deferred growth vehicle, the RESP. Scenario B, you're going to contribute $2,500 a year every year for 17 years to max out the grants and have it grow. Scenario C, you're going to do the $2,500 every year into the RESP, and you're going to do $2,500 into a corporate investment account every year. What does that look like? Scenario A, lump sum upfront, $50,000. It has the longest time horizon to grow and compound. It's going to grow to $235,000. Scenario B, where you're contributing every year $2,500, it's going to grow to $121,000. So you are getting all the grants in scenario B, but the growth trajectory, because the money's not in on day one, the compounding is wildly different. Scenario C is you're doing $2,500 into the RESP and $2,500 into your corporate investment account. It's going to wind up being about $199,000. The reason scenario C is thrown into the mix here is because it's highly flexible, You can drain the RESP account, and then you still have corporate investment dollars should the child decide to specialize, to continue to pursue education, to do something else. So maybe you just finished your, your degree in biomechanics, and now you want to go into surgery, you want to go into something else, you want to specialize, do internal medicine. It's another layer of schooling. It's another layer of cost. So you want to know, you want to have some flexibility available there. So these are three scenarios that really just show you the difference. If you had the means and you wanted to fully take advantage of the RESP, loading it upfront has the longest unmolested compounding time. And as we've talked about before, and we do in our presentations, the rule of 72 is your rate of return divided by 72. It tells you the number of years it's going to take for that money to double. And if you have 18 years of it being in there, you might have 2 or 3 doubling periods.
Yeah, I think that's a great illustration for those of you that are watching our podcast. For those of you listening, hopefully you can visualize it and watch it back later. But the important things there is there's 3 different ways to get to the same finish line. And it really is just dependent on your own situation. So, to answer that question, you should fully fund your RESP immediately. I'm always hesitant with like definitive statements like that. You don't need to, but if you are going to open up your RESP, the numbers kind of point you towards just really leaning fully into the compounding effects. So if you listen to this podcast, you're probably in the bucket where you have the accessible funds. Oftentimes we tell our clients, like, you have the money, it's just about a reallocation of that money. So what accounts do you have it in? And, we do that every single year. So it's not an income problem. It's just depending of, your plan for your taxes and where you want to hold that money for specific goals throughout your life. So if you are going to fully fund it, option C obviously makes the most sense because you have 2 different accounts going for you. I would always say that dropping money in on an annual basis, like having a automation on whatever platform you're using, have that automated. So the first week of January, that money goes in there and you let it compound, or just take that 50K and drop it in the beginning. And yes, you're giving out those grants, but the compounding effects are going to absolutely smash it out of the park. The other thing I would say on that is option C. If you want the most money, like, that is obviously a great tool of having that money inside your corporation, but sometimes there's gonna be other goals you could do. And really, Tyson alluded to this about your time horizon. So depending what your time horizon is, like, are you going to be wanting to be mortgage free prior to your kid going to school? Are you be closer to retirement before your kid goes to school? One of those things you could do instead of having that 50K just sitting, earning interest inside your corporate structure, depending on the rest of your plan, you may have some passive income problems. You could also have that same money that would otherwise be inside your corporation. You could pull it over onto the personal side and pay down a non-deductible debt like your private residence, and then tap into that via home equity line of credit or refinance later on if and when your child does need the extra money. So at least that money is doing something for you, improving your cash flow over the years. And I say that to say this, everyone's situation is a bit different. So a definitive statement like you should fully fund your kid's RESP doesn't really make that much sense to me. It really just depends on your situation. But as Tyson illustrated, there's 3 different ways to get to the same finish line, and there's probably another 40.
There's
That can get you
probably a
there as
few
well.
more. Yeah, there's probably some nuance in there. But yeah, I mean, we want to show 3 big categories and then work with the family to say, like, this is what your options are. And then on top of that, there's many different streams that we can look at. Some people are huge proponents of family RESPs. So if you're going to have lots of kids, or you already have lots of kids, they want to have one unit. And sometimes for the parents or the subscribers is they have one thing to think about, even though you have 4 or 5 children. I have a family that has 8 children, not my family. I have a client family that has 8 children. And, you got to keep things organized, dates of birth and who's going to school when do they graduate and where are they going to go to university. So sometimes family RESP simplifies the picture. The challenge is, what if your second oldest child is Doogie Howser and they're going to go to Stanford or they're going to go somewhere and you want to use all of the RESP money to fund their education? They could potentially drain the entire family RESP. So there's always pros and cons to every situation. Then there's the individual RESPs. The individual RESPs is per child social insurance number. It's very nice to be organized. So if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 children, you can have 5 RESPs and you can see who you funded, who's behind, who's getting all their grants. It's much cleaner in terms of an audit process for the family and for the financial advisor to see who's getting what and what's happening. It's very clean that way. So you get a couple of different options.
Yeah. And I think it goes down to the quantitative versus qualitative sometimes is the numbers can point you towards, oh, family RSP, let that compound and make sense, pool the money. But when it comes to administrative burden, you're busy. It's a bandwidth problem that is keeping things organized and clean and simple sometimes will outweigh the quantitative side of it. So that's a great point about family versus individual RESP. So switching gears into our learning center, ESG. So we talked about that before. Grants, those of you on this call, you're not going to get the bonds, so don't worry about the bonds. But when it comes to the grants, the ESG grants, I know there's a couple different ways that you can use them and how you get them. And, do you manually apply for it? Does it automatically happen when you put your money in? So let's jump into that. CESG grants and limits. How does that work for RESPs?
Yeah, so you get a limit of matching on $2,500 of contributions per year. It's a 20% grant. So if you're doing year to year, it's very simple. It's very linear, right? As long as you're putting in $2,500, you're getting the full 20% grant on that $2,500 contribution. However, we do have some families that they come to us and they're like, I have a 7-year-old, I have an 8 or a 10-year-old. We haven't started RESPs yet. Did we lose the grant money? And the answer is no. You can actually do catch-ups, but you have to do them 2 years at a time. So you would be doing $5,000 contributions. You're getting double the amount of grant. You can't go above that threshold. And then next year you would do another $5,000 catch-up until you've caught up on all of the years that you've missed. And then you can kind of do whatever you want. You get a lifetime grant maximum of $7,200. And you can't get any more out of this program, which means that maybe you want, once you've hit that limit, if you want to continue saving, you think this child's going to go to an expensive medical school or pursue some higher education, get their PhD, and you want to fund that, then maybe you want to utilize, as the parent, your tax-free savings account or even your corporate investment account so that retained earnings, the money that's sitting somewhere is sitting and growing at the same time. When you are going to redeem from your, am I jumping ahead? Talking about
No, no,
redemption.
you're good. That actually goes right to our next one, which is the redemption rules. Um,
Awesome.
the only thing I would quickly pause and talk about the CSG. I guess we just kind of skipped past it, but we both said that you won't qualify for any extra or the bonds. Reason being is based off your net income. So if you're high income earner, you don't get any bonuses. So that's why when we kind of brush past it, like you're not getting any extra money, you can expect the grants like the 7,200 that Tyson talked about, but you won't get any more because your net income is too much. So
Yeah.
sorry, I guess to spin on that, I guess if you're early career physician, like if you're a resident or if you're like a locum optometrist who's just kind of starting out and you're starting working in like August and you're gonna have a low income year and you have a child already. So perhaps in that first year, you'll get the extra money and you can qualify for the bonds. Again, I shouldn't say a definitive statement, but once you are in the main income earning years and you're a full fledged doctor, then yeah, you're not gonna get that because your income is too much.
Yeah. 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 There could be some scenarios where you just have a low income year. Maybe you have $1 million of student tuition credits and it wipes out your income for 2 years. We've seen some pretty crazy numbers. And then when they start earning income, that's a huge offset to your taxable income. You might qualify for the Canadian Learning Bond in your first few years if you have a child already. So those scenarios could happen.
Yeah, again, it was one of those things that I'm like, as I said it, I'm like, wait a minute, there's nuance to here as well. So yeah,
There's going to be some one-offs. Yeah, definitely.
of course. But that's a perfect segue. So going into the redemption rules. So we talked about the grant. So you can put your money in, you'll get some grant money as well. All that can be compounded and invested. Let's say you do it in one lump sum at the start of each year. So you're doing your maximum annual deposits to get your grant and letting that compound. If you're doing the 50,000 off the bat, I don't know if we talked about this, but if you're doing option one that you talked about, if you do 50K right in the beginning, do you get grants for every single year? Like, how does that work?
So if you do the 50K right at the beginning, you don't qualify for the grants. Like you'll get the first grant, but you won't get the additional subsequent grants because the contribution's already made. You've made it above the limit in which the Canadian government will release grants. So you're only getting tax deferred compound growth, which based on the numbers that we showed, in the long run, it's more than doing the small amount and getting the free money every year. So it's kind of like, which priority are we going to go with? So yeah, you can go that route and get all the grant money, or you can make the lump sum deposit and have it grow. But like what happens down the road, if we're going to talk about redemptions and getting the money out, the RESP can actually be in existence for 35 years. So if your child is going to become a young adult and go travel or figure their life out or do a myriad of different things, they can go back to school later and you can keep the RESP in existence for 35 years before you have to collapse it, which if you had all that money invested, it can stay invested. It's going to compound. It might double one or two more times. So that could be a really good thing. And then what do? You could always transfer it to another sibling that also has an RESP open. So in the event where we have families that have 2, 3, 4, 5 children and child number 1 doesn't go to university, you can cascade that money down to child number 2. The CESG, the grant, also rolls over. It stays sheltered. I think the rule used to be that you had to give the grant money back, but it looks like you can keep that grant money inside. It continues to grow, and then you deal with it later on. Another option that you have is you as the subscriber or the parent that sets up the plan. If the child doesn't go to school or if there's lots of leftover funds that are in there, you can always roll the RESP into your RRSP, your retirement account, which is really nice. And so that as long as you have available contribution room, you can roll that over into your RSP for your retirement because that's your money. You don't get a tax deduction when you deposit it into the RESP. And I don't know if you get a tax deduction when you do the tax-free rollover into your RRSP. It would make sense that you don't. But then you also don't pay tax of taking it out and then putting it somewhere else. So it's a tax-free rollover. Next one. There's a few of these. Next one. If your child doesn't go to post-secondary education because something happened and they've developed a disability, they get the disability tax credit, which I think we're going to do a whole episode on that. They've really expanded the program in the last few years. If your child gets the disability tax credit, they qualify for an RDSP program, a registered disability savings plan. You can roll the RESP into the RDSP, the registered disability savings plan. What is that? That is designed to be the pension for the child that's going to become an adult that has a disability. And it's going to fund some of their future financial needs. If it's there and invested long enough, it can be a fully funded, self-funded pension so that it can give them an income when they need it in their adult life. Very cool. And then you could fully collapse the RESP. This is kind of like the last option. If none of these other ones work, you can collapse the option. You have to repay the grant money, and then you'll have to pay tax on the growth that happens in the investment account, the RESP. You'll pay tax on the growth, but you can just collapse the whole thing, take the money out if the child never goes to school. That's 5 options. That was a lot of talking.
But they're all great options. Really, the general rule of thumb is if you have a registered account, they are registered with the CRA. So I always tell clients, like, it don't complicate. If you have registered money, you may think that, like, oh, okay, it's a different specialized account. How do I invest this? Whatever. More or less, money's money. Like your investment holder, your custodian, if you're doing Quest Trade, Wealthsimple, Project Wealth, whatever, they don't care if it's registered or not. It's just a wrapper of treatment for the CRA. So if you don't use certain types of registered account, general rule of thumb is there's some other kind of registered account that you can also roll it to or benefit from. So just jumping backwards to the option of RESP to RRSP, and I know there's a lot of acronyms and letters being kicked around, but your kid doesn't use all the money in the education. Let's say they had a scholarship, so you only need some of that money, and you don't have another kid in the hierarchy of who's going next. So okay, well, I can either withdraw this money or just transfer to my RRSP. You can transfer to your RRSP as long as you have the room. So you got to double check that you have the room and that you're not running your numbers wrong because you're doing monthly deposits and then you think you have the room, so you transfer this over. So you just double check you have the room. But if you do have the room, yes, you can move from RESP to RRSP, and you're not going to get another tax deduction. Reason being is if you were just take the money out of your RESP, you have to have that income added to your marginal tax rate, which is already going to be high. Plus, you got to give back the bond, the CESG bond. So you got the 20%, and you got to give the 20% back. So if you're in like a 40% tax bracket, you're going to have more income in the 40% tax bracket. Plus, you got to give back 20%. So 60% loss or hit on that is quite significant. So instead, you can just add your tax deferral strategy, which is just moving that money to your RRSP. And then it goes as per your retirement plan that you can do that. The other thing I would add is sometimes people are frustrated that if they give the money to the kid and they use it effectively, so you put the money in the RESP and the kid goes to school and they withdraw it and it's taxed under the kid's name. Some people are frustrated about the fact that it's like, man, there's just tax everywhere. Yes, but don't be scared of tax. Sometimes tax does suck, yes, but it has other benefits that it can open up. For example, when your child is getting taxed, taxable income in their hands, for the most part, unless they're doing some fantastic work, have their own business while they're going to school, which I doubt if they're going higher for the education, they'll usually have a part-time job or not that much income that's being earned. So even though they're having the RESP withdrawals added to their taxable income on top of whatever else they have, they'll probably be under the basic exemption or not that much over. So they're not going to have a lot of tax bill owed to them. I would argue that you probably don't even want to use your tuition tax credits, so they'll be in a low tax bracket regardless. So they're not going to pay that much tax. But there are the benefits of them having taxable income, such as they get to open up our RSP room for themselves. So while they're going to school, they're going to be opening up some RRSP room, albeit it's not that much, but it's still something. Let's fast forward when they graduate. Because they were having RSP opened up throughout those years, they can graduate, they can stay as a sole proprietor, earn as much income as they can individually. They can use their tuition credits, wipe that tax bill out, go into year two and rinse and repeat more or less. But now they'll also have money in their RSP that they can move this over to. So they'll have their RSP room from the first year, and then they'll have the RSP room carried over from when they were going to school. In addition to that, if you want to help your child start their asset growing early on, you can give them some money to put into their RRSP in addition to their FHSA, and now use that as a first-time home. And now you're creating generational wealth and helping them build an asset. So there are advantages of doing that. Plus, earned income will have CPP room that's opened up as well, or they're contributing to CPP. There's a bunch of different benefits. So don't get so frustrated about the fact that, well, it's a RESP. Why are they being taxed in their hands? This sucks. I should pay for it a different way. There's always a cost to everything that you do, but I would always argue that the RESP really benefits, especially for doctors that are going to be earning good income. It really benefits you in a number of different ways. So don't be scared of the taxation of RESPs in your kids' names. Next thing we want to talk about is the opportunity cost. So we kind of talked about this already, about the opportunity cost of investing the money early, but let's talk about the opportunity cost of how you invest it. So let's say in this example, you are having a kid that's 1 or 2 years old, and now you're opening the RESP for the first time. In relation to investment profile, risk profile, time horizons, let's talk about the opportunity cost of an RESP, Tyson.
Yeah, I mean, some people look at this and say, like in the example, you do $50,000, assuming you earn 9%, it's $235,000 by the time the child is 18 years old. Some people will say, if I kept that money in my business account, I can make more money. That might be true. That, if they're a developer or they manufacture something, they might be able to do that. But it's good to have the conversations to show them what could happen in being a good steward of money and having the right programs and having things in the right places, because we've also seen people who are very confident in themselves and use that money for something, and then when the need arises, finances are tied up, the money's not available, the business has gone belly up. Now, with our current client base, with mostly physicians and doctors and dentists, I mean, the business is not going to really go away. It might transition, it might change over the years, but the business itself is not going to go away. But we will have those conversations where people say, I can make more money in real estate, maybe, but it's not tax deferred. It's not compounding in a certain way that, you can just take the money out specifically for education, for post-secondary education. And so there's conversations to be had that we have to look at the nuance of that.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add on to that is when you look at the opportunity cost is, for the most part, when you look at investing into your child's RESP for the first couple of years, so they're 1 or 2 years old and you're opening up the account, they're going to have a long time horizon. They're not really going to be accessing that money until they're 15, 16, 17, 18, somewhere around there, depending. Obviously, they go ahead of the class and things like that. So there's that anomaly. But let's just say 17, 18 for the most part. You have a very long time horizon, over a decade. So for the opportunity cost to take advantage of the tax deferred growth, get the best returns projected, which would be a more equity focused portfolio because you get higher returns, but you're also going to be in line with inflation, cost of living, whatever that may be. So as there's an exponential growth in cost of living and how that would manifest itself in 17 years when they start going to school, at least for the most part, you can ride that growth as well. So if you want to take advantage of opportunity costs, if your child is young and you're opening up your RESPs for the first couple times, definitely invest in heavier equities and just really realize that your time horizon is quite long. And then, when your kids 10, 11, 12 years old, you can start tapering that down and getting more to like a balance, more conservative as they get closer to graduation because you want to preserve that wealth. But you really have the opportunity to take some big shots early on in their RESP career. So when they're young, go equity focused and then start to taper that down as they get a little bit younger. And you don't have to worry so much about the grants. That stuff will be automatically applied for the most part, depending who your custodian or who your account is with. But for the most part, they'll automatically have that in your account. So you'll see it in your activity. So if you open up your RESP account, you can look at your transactions, your activity inside that account, and you'll see like they're buying and trading and rebalancing, whatever. And part of that, you'll see the grant money that comes in. And if you're curious if that has happened to your account, you can just log in and take a look at that. And if you missed it for whatever reason, you can always make it back for a year miss. So let's say your kid's 2 years old and you made your RESP for the first time. They're 2 years old, go heavy equities, get the grant for this year, and you can make it 1 year of missed grants as well. So you can get all that money compounded, throw into the stock market, and let it ride because you don't need the money, or your kids don't need the money for a very, very, very long time. So switching gears, we're jumping into our prescription pad segment. So again, as a reminder, these questions come to us from our closed Facebook group for doctors across Canada. So if you want to get your questions in, join the Facebook group. We'll let you know prior to our episode what we're chatting about. You can ask your questions and we'll answer them in longer format here. And if we don't get a chance to, we'll answer them when we go live in our Facebook group as well. So get your questions in. We'll answer them as they come in. So prescription pad, let's jump into the first one here. So funding your RESP to maximize your grants. We kind of chatted about that as well. I think that question was more in relation to, should I do the annual contributions or should I do a lump sum contribution? Again, it really just depends on your situation. So to answer that one quickly, we chatted about it already. If you have the money and your goal is to have the most amount of money set aside for your child, then it doesn't make sense to fund it annually to maximize the grant money. Instead, you can outperform those numbers by just compounding effects. Again, what I just talked about is you have a long time horizon, put that lump sum in, invest it for the future, get the 1 year of grant, but don't worry so much about the small grants year in, year in. So you'll get the most money that way. Next question on prescription pad, Tyson, this is for you, is how do I open an RESP? Going really to the grassroots of the question. I think sometimes these questions are good because we get so in the weeds about the particulars about it, we forget about the basics. So how do I even open up an RESP? Like someone just had a kid, what does that look like?
Yeah. So wherever you are saving and investing money is you can open a registered account with them. So in this case, we're talking about a registered education savings plan, or RESP. So if you're doing it by yourself and you're on Wealthsimple, you can open an RESP there. If you are at the bank or you're dealing with an investment firm, you can open an RESP there. They want your money, they want your business, they will open the account for you. But what do you need? You need the child to have a social insurance number. And Vishal, we talked about this before, is like you're the most recent baby in the group. And so you had a child last year, she's really cute. And when you were at the hospital, they give you a little package, right? And they had a application for a social insurance number in there. They had all the forms and the walkthroughs and the guides that an exhausted parent would want in one place. And I think that hospitals that do that are great. It's fantastic. So you need a social insurance number for the child before you can apply for the RESP. So sometimes that creates a delay, especially because as a brand new exhausted parent, you might not have the capacity to put the child to sleep, clean up, and then fill out some forms, some government forms, which are always awesome. So your financial advisor can't do that part for you. They might help you, but they can't do it all for you. Once you have the social insurance number, any platform where you can save and invest money will open an RESP for you. And then you're just going to go through the regular account opening process. You're going to have to provide ID, void check, that kind of stuff. And then talk about your time horizon and your risk. This is kind of where what Vishal is talking about, what I've talked about. the nuance and having a professional to have a conversation with can make a lot of sense to help you prioritize and then execute the proper things in the right order of operations. So just because you have 50 grand doesn't mean you should invest all 50 grand right away. Because what if that's your only 50 grand? Then it might not make sense. You might have to do some other things first, because the last thing you want to do is have to dip into the RESP, repay the grants, and you're never going to get that back.
Yeah. I think it's perfectly said. And really, when it comes down to opening the RESP, it really just depends on, Tyson mentioned what hospital you're at. So if you don't have that booklet, I think it was like the counselors that were at the hospital. So Fraser Health did a great job. They're the ones that came by and gave that package. But if not, you can find everything online. So I think it's just on the Government Canada website of how to open up a SIN number for your kid and things of that type. So yes, you could do it. There's a long list of things to do. Uh, so, you don't need to open it first things first. Like right before you get your kid home, before you learn how to use the car seat, you got to open up the RESP. That's not the case, but you can get to it when you get to it.
Mm-hmm.
Next one. So this is always a funny one. Tyson kind of shared a story early on about these private RESP companies. And I was going to say a funny story, but I don't know if it's funny or sad or crazy. But we had a client who had a child last year, and she called me. She's like, "Yeah, I'm ready to open up our ESP." And she's like, "It's kind of weird. Like someone from company blank has been calling me and just blowing up my phone about opening this RESP." And she was like, "I was so shocked. I was like, who this person is? How they got my number?" And so she asked the person, like, "How'd you get my information? I don't even know you. Like, how'd you get my information?" And they're like, "You signed up for a baby registry at, like, I don't even know what store it was or platform, but wherever she signed up for a baby registry, I guess there's some kind of like partnership or maybe data mining. Like they bought the data from these companies. So they knew when her baby's due date was, and that's where they got the information, the contact information to email her, call her, like nonstop trying to open up this RESP." And we
That's
were just both
wild.
shocked. I was like, "That's crazy. I didn't realize like it was to that extent." Tyson mentioned before, back in the day, I don't know if this happens anymore, but there used to be some of them roaming around the hospitals and,
Mm-hmm.
door knocking while you're going through postpartum, like, "Hey man, can I help you with an RESP?" And so crazy, crazy times. But there's a difference of companies, of RESP specific companies versus just doing it at whatever institution or financial institution you're at. So what is the difference between doing it through a bank versus like a specialized company?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to deal through a bank or a financial institution that invests money, I think you have the most flexibility. You can start and stop, which, some people have to do. Sometimes your cash flow needs are not the same year after year. The roof blows off your house, the car breaks down, whatever, and it all happens at once, right? And your appliances all go. So sometimes cash flow needs dictate that you have to start and stop the program. When you're dealing with a bank or a professional like investment firm, they're very flexible. They'll work with you. When we're dealing with some of these specialized ones, they used to always have the word scholarship attached to the name. The way that their programs work is if you stop funding, you could forfeit all of the previous deposits that you've done. And part of the challenge too is we've seen contracts as aggressive as the first 3 annual deposits all go to commissions. And so if you're maxing out, you're doing $2,500 a year, that's a lot of money, right? That's 7,500 bucks that's going to commissions for this salesperson. And then the fourth year deposit starts growing and whatnot. The strings attached programs have so many gotchas, and the brand new parent never reads the fine print. I've read them from a few different companies. I don't like them. I'm not sure how they're allowed to exist. But if you have a platform like Wealthsimple, or you have a financial professional, or even if you're at a bank, it's preferred that you go there and do that because of the flexibility, because of the low fees. There's no strings attached. If you're at bank A and you decide to pull all your business and go to bank B, you're allowed to do that. It's a lateral transfer. It stays registered. You can move your money anywhere you want. It's your money. And that's a big piece of the conversation that I like to have with clients about this and all of your other accounts. It's your life savings, it's your earnings. You should have control over it. And so you should ask lots of questions. And if you have questions for us, we're happy to answer them.
Absolutely. And the other thing about, you talk about the fee structure. So your first 2 to 3 years are often gone to the fees, and then you start in year 3 or 4. The tough thing about that, if you remember my earlier conversation about the opportunity costs is the first couple of years are so important to get started because you're going to be all growth focused and just let that compound. So if you're missing the first 3 years when your child has the highest risk tolerance because they have the highest, longest time horizon, that's a lot of missed opportunity as well. So it's kind of like a double whammy, which sucks. And then, there's a lot of nuances inside the literature of these plans. If you don't use your money, you don't get it back, depending on the company, and then rolls over to other kids, and it's not ideal. So definitely, if you are opening up your RESP, open it up at your own institution. You have control, you have ownership, you can see it, you can make definitive decisions with it because you're money. And it seems simple, but oftentimes people get duped into other programs that don't make the most sense for them. So that's it for us today on episode 3 of Portfolio Talks. Of course, if this gave you value, we really, really appreciate subscriptions and likes and shares. It just really allows us to keep on doubling down on this platform. The thing about having your own firm as a boutique firm, time is valuable. So, it's a good thing when we take the time out to build this out, that we get the feedback from you guys. It just really inspires us to keep on going, to give you guys more and more content, and just doubling down on doing this in a more in-depth and higher level. So appreciate all the feedback we've gotten so far. Love it. We'll keep it up, and stay tuned for the next episodes of Portfolio Talks. We'll be breaking down more financial topics and prescribing you your financial plan so you can run your finances, not having your finances run you. Thanks, and tune in next time.